Hey Revolutionaries, I'm excited to bring you this week's episode with Marie Phil, where we're talking triathlon coaching, photography, and all things mindset. You know, Marie has an amazing story of how she was able to pivot out of the New York City service industry and party scene and got into, health and fitness, and just recently this past fall completed her first full-length Ironman triathlon. Yeah, that's a big deal. So, and you know what? With her mindset and the way she looks at life and the way she's been able to change herself around, I really think her endurance mindset, her experience with triathlons, hearing her experience and her story of getting through her first one is something that we can all benefit from right now. To get us through this coronavirus situation that, it's not going away in a few days. It's going to be a few months for us to get through it. We need to endure. And so I'm so glad that she was able to come on and share her thoughts about her experience about just being an athlete and pivoting and being able to endure. And you're going to hear an amazing story of how she started out with her first Ironman in Cozumel right at the beginning of the race. These, three big challenges that she had to overcome. Marie, I don't know how you did it and stayed focused after a very challenging start to the race, but thanks again for being on and sharing your thoughts and sharing your experience with us. Super grateful for it. But before we get to the episode, I just wanted to take a second just for two things here. One is to just say, hey, just check in with everybody, see how everybody's doing out there. Hopefully everyone is, staying at home and staying healthy and eating healthy food and working out and, working on your mindset. And I just want to say, hey, we're all in this together. For the last couple of weeks when I got back, I got back from Asia around March 5th, for those of you that are following me. And for the first, week and a half when I got back, I self-quarantined because, I had been traveling on planes and such. And I was really unnerved because, getting over jet lag of traveling 30 hours is brutal. It sucks. And it makes you feel like you're sick. So I didn't know whether I had the coronavirus or not. For the first couple of weeks I was back, and I kind of was fading in and out of reality with the jet lag and stuff. Anyways, I've been fine, knock on wood here so far. But my point being that, staying focused and getting back into a routine when things are changing so crazily day by day is a real challenge to my mindset, has been. And I've been kind of paralyzed on the couch for the last couple of weeks, but I'm trying to get back into work and getting more productive again. I understand that. Let's all work on our mindset. And so I can't wait for you all to listen to Marie's episode coming up here. But the other thing is that since we're all challenged with this mindset, now is the time. It's kind of a call to arms, I believe, because we all have this opportunity before us for reinvention. And that's the other thing I wanted to mention. Now's the time more than ever where you might have some downtime. You might have some time to rethink things, or working from home, or being challenged with learning new technologies, all the communication technologies. All kinds of things might be going on in your lives right now. Challenges with your families, or challenges with where you used to like to travel and now you can't travel anymore, like for me right now. But it's really a call to arms right now for reinvention. So I know if you're listening out there, you're probably interested in that. So now's the time, everybody. I'm thinking about putting a little bit more content together, or doing some more Facebook Lives, and just to talk about this opportunity that we have, give people some other ideas of how to reinvent themselves here kind of immediately. I'm actually going to rethink through the 10 ways I was going to reinvent myself this year a little bit, because things have changed already. So you got to, be able to react and pivot and continually reinvent yourself. Anyways. So if anybody's got, some interesting ways they're reinventing themselves and they feel like they want to share it, please, you can tweet me at Jimium Group. So at Jimium Group, JIMIUMGROUP. Or you can email JimJim at jimjimsreinventionrevolution.com, or share something on the Facebook page. That's Jim Jim's Reinvention Revolution Podcast, and that's on Facebook. All right, well, I'm going to go wash my hands while you listen to this week's episode. This episode of Jim's Reinvention Revolution podcast is brought to you by MG Schlachter, a built environment and architectural consulting firm with an in-house production team. Delivering support services in the retail, hospitality, and residential sectors for leading brands worldwide, MG Schlachter is reinventing, something near and dear to my heart, of course, architectural support services. Suffice it to say that whatever built environment or architectural project you're working on, MG Schlachter can step in and help accelerate your growth. So, if you're looking for a built environment and architectural services firm with an in-house production team to help you reinvent your next project, check out MG Schlachter. Find them on the web at mgschlachter.com. That's mgschlachter.com, mgschlachter.com.
Welcome to Jim's Reinvention Revolution podcast, the show that explores reinvention in the digital age as it relates to career, creativity, and technology. Stay tuned for interviews with professionals, entrepreneurs, and creatives that have reimagined success and are making a pivot. If you'd like to listen to the entire back catalog, visit jimreinventionrevolution.com for instant access. And now, here's your host, Jim.
Hey everybody, this is Jim. Welcome to episode 66 of Jim's Reinvention Revolution podcast. And I'm talking today with Marie Phil, and we're talking triathlon coaching, photography, and most importantly, right now, all things mindset. So Marie, welcome to the Reinvention Revolution.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me.
Well, hey, thanks for taking time out of your day and sending me some notes. Like I think you're the first guest to actually put together notes for me to look at when I wanted them to be on. I'm like, I love this. You were fired up. But I think that speaks to your triathlete mindset or something like that.
Planning, yeah.
Yeah, planning or just really like a focused way to attack things. And I feel like, this is my first podcast interview, the first one that'll be out since this whole coronavirus thing hit. And it really kind of threw me for a loop. I think it's thrown everybody around the world for a big loop. And I was trying to figure out how to approach the next episode and thinking like, maybe I just felt like it can't be business as usual, at least for this next episode, at least for this one. I'll give myself one to kind of like regain my ground. But, last week I was kind of paralyzed on the couch a little bit and just really feeling a lot of angst. And I thought, what do people need to hear right now? Because this virus is not going away soon. It's something that we're going to have to deal with for a while. And I thought, we need to have a great mindset right now because you can really just screw yourself up by all the thoughts in your head. But also, we have to endure. This is not going away in a week or two. It might be weeks or months. And that's why you came up on my radar. So I'm really excited to talk to you because ever since actually we met in Cancun, I guess it was, I got interested in you because of all the things you do, and we connected a little bit down there. But anyways, tell people, the first question I have for you, sorry to have this big opening here, but I feel like I have to say something about this coronavirus thing.
No, of course.
Yeah, my first question for you right now, before we get into all the stuff that you're doing, is how has the coronavirus affected your training schedule, like at home? Like, what are you doing different now that you weren't doing different a month ago or 6 weeks ago?
Yeah. It's definitely, all the gyms are closed and the pools are closed.
Right.
So, when we're looking at that cross training, trying to go to the gym, trying to get the strength conditioning in, trying to, get my cardiopulmonary system up more than it needs to be. We're coming off a very long off season here.
Okay.
And I do my races at the end of the year at this point. So, yeah, I'm fortunate that I had a running race that I was scheduled for. So we can still run and bike outside. You can still do that and keep the social distancing. So that's been pretty cool. But yeah, we really want to have that strength conditioning and that cross training involved as we get better as we progress through the training plans. So that's been tough.
So it's kind of just impacted maybe the swim part of what you do, at least for the moment, mostly, let's say, because
the swim and the weights. Yeah.
Yeah, I gotcha. So have you figured out a pivot quite yet, or what are you thinking about?
Yeah, I'm still running and biking outside. We can still do resistance type exercises inside. I can still hold a pile of books and do some squats, right. And do things like that to kind of keep that maintained at this point. But we're still coming off of the off season. So it's more focused on running and biking at this point, and we do what we can.
I see. I gotcha. Well, oh man, I have so many questions for you, because this is taking me back now, like back to last October. You said you do your races later in the year, and so last October we were in Cancun, so we went down there for the Nomad Summit. Another question for you, real quick: why did you go to the Nomad Summit, and what were you looking to get out of it?
So I was the photographer for the Nomad Summit this year,
oh, right. Okay.
and I was
right.
last year.
Okay.
Yeah, so I was the event photographer, and then it ended up working out perfectly that I just stayed down there for it was like 7 or 8 weeks before my Ironman, which was based in Cozumel, Mexico. So it was actually cheaper for me to stay down there instead of flying down, going to the event, flying back, and then flying back.
Right.
It was actually cheaper to stay.
Oh, well, that was perfect. I kind of forgot you were the photographer. I was trying to remember how we first ran into each other, and you started to stand out to me, I guess, right at the end of the conference in Cancun.
Yeah, we talked on the boat.
Yeah, well, I know we talked on the boat when we got there, but I remember you were leaving the hotel, and you had your luggage outside, and you rented your own taxi or van or something, and they were like loading this big case into the van. I'm thinking like, oh my God, is that a bicycle? It looks like a bicycle case,
Yes, it was. Yeah.
I was like, what? Like she's a photographer, but she's got this bike with her. Like, it was confusing to me, and it was just kind of like piqued my interest a little bit. And then I find out, oh my God, you're this tri-coach athlete person, and like, wow, interesting. Anyways, it was taking me back because we'll get to this story in a second, but another reason why I wanted to have you on was to tell your story of your first Ironman triathlon, right? And maybe you can describe the difference between what's a triathlon, what does that word mean, and what's an Ironman triathlon? What's the difference?
Oh, I love this question. So a lot of people get mixed up. They're like, oh, how was your marathon this weekend or whatever? And I'm like, okay, it was a triathlon, and it was only an Olympic distance, right? Which is like, so a marathon is a particular distance.
Right.
And running, right? So you want to say race.
Okay.
Typically, how was your race this weekend is like the general.
I see. Yeah, never ask a triathlete how their marathon was. Okay, I got it.
Unless they actually ran a marathon, then it's totally appropriate.
Okay,
but it's just, it's funny. It's like, oh, don't give me the credit for doing a marathon. I didn't do a marathon, So,
right.
That's funny. But so the Ironman is a distance that includes a marathon in it. So, it's a 2.4 mile open water swim, or 3,900 meters. It's like a 3.9K for people who know that. It's a 112 mile bike or 180 kilometer bike. And then a full marathon at 26.2 miles. That's about 42.2 kilometers, I believe. So the Ironman is, one of the world's toughest single day endurance feats on the planet.
Right. So that's not over like 3 days you get to do that. It's all one day as fast as you can do all 3 of those things, right?
17-hour cutoff time. Yes.
Oh, 17-hour cut. Okay. So you have to even actually do it with under 17 hours. Wow. Okay. Interesting. I did not know that. Yeah, that's pretty. Now, just listening to you describe it, it sounds pretty mellow, but were people listening out there? A full marathon, over 100 miles biking, and how long was the swim again?
2.4 miles.
Oh, that's ridiculous. Okay. So contrast that with a regular, like I know they have a triathlon up here in Cleveland on Lake Erie. I don't think it's an Ironman length, though. It's like I don't know, mini triathlon? Or what are the different lengths out there?
Yeah, so there's sprint, which could be anything. They're pretty all over the map or all over the board as far as distances go.
Mm-hmm.
And then Olympics are pretty typical. Those are about a mile. It's like 0.9. It's about a mile swim.
Yeah.
I think it's a 26-mile bike and then a 10K at 6.2-mile run.
I see. I think this is the Olympic size they have up here, yeah.
Yeah, those are very common.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
And then there's a half Ironman distance, or a 70.3 is the half Ironman, and then the full, or also called 140.6.
I see. I gotcha. Well, before we dig into your story of your experience of your first Ironman triathlon that was down there in Cozumel, which is really one of the reasons why I wanted to have you on here too. Like I said before, it's just amazing kind of story of tackling your first one and overcoming some of the things that happened during that race. Mm-hmm. I want to understand more about how you got into triathlon training and how you decided to become a triathlon coach. Because I know you were living in New York City and maybe not in the best, living the best lifestyle, living a fun lifestyle, but maybe not the most healthy lifestyle. And how did the photography kind of fit into that? It sounded like you kind of got into both of those things earlier on. So maybe you could rewind things a little bit for us.
Yeah. So I always start talking about like my working career. I was a veterinary assistant for 7.5 years here in Pennsylvania. I got my first job at 14. And then I decided I didn't want to involve finances in it. Like, too much of my heart was in like animals, and okay. I didn't want to involve a business or like finances. I saw the way the industry was evolving from a very young age, and I kind of wanted to know part of it, or I wanted a smaller part of it. Mm-hmm. So I decided to go to college for photography, really to like seek out the beauty in life. And that was my biggest driving factor at that point. I had seen a lot in the veterinary world. So I went to New York City. I got accepted at School of Visual Arts, which is a private art institute in New York City. It's a $40,000 a year school. It was very expensive. So I started bartending and serving to try to pay for college. Mm-hmm. And then very much got caught up in that lifestyle. So I worked for 6 years bartending in New York before I left this last July, and ended up in private event management and working in bartending private events. So it was really cool to grow through that process. But yeah, there were a lot of nights of like heavy drinking, right. and being caught up in the scene and in New York City and the nightlife and the glamour of the lights and everything. So sure. There was a lot of that. So I actually wasn't feeling well. I thought I had a heart problem at like age 25. I went to the doctor. She told me I had a stomach ulcer.
Oh, wow.
From drinking
Yikes.
And partying
right.
too much.
Right.
Yeah. So that was a big eye opener. I kind of went through a little bit of a heartbreak at that time too. And the two things combined, I was like, okay, let's get some fitness going. I had a pool in my building at that point, and I saw this like sticker on Instagram, and this is kind of embarrassing for me to talk about, but it was like single, taken, and or training with like a little swim, bike, run guy next to it.
Oh, really? Oh, that's funny. Okay.
And training was checked. And it just,
I love that.
It just fit exactly like where I was.
Right. Yeah.
You're
like,
at that point.
Oh, maybe that's me.
And
okay.
Yeah. And I was like, oh my gosh. So I got a bike and I signed up for the New York City Olympic distance triathlon.
Okay.
And,
okay. Hold on right there. Were you a biker beforehand? I mean, maybe you ran as just kind of general fitness stuff, but
I was always a swimmer.
You were always a swimmer. Okay.
Always a swimmer. So when
Did you swim in high school? Were you like on the swim team or anything?
No, I was when I was in summer camp
Okay.
as a kid.
All right.
They took us through progressive levels, and like you couldn't go in the deep end unless you had that like intermediate advanced
Right.
level, and they
Sure.
tested us like every week to see where we were.
Okay.
And I remember really working my butt off as a kid to progress to the next level. I really wanted that deep end access,
Okay.
right?
Interesting. Wow.
So swimming was always and still is, my sport of the three.
Gotcha. Okay. But at this time, you weren't really, that in shape yet, or you decided, hey, I'm going to start to work on my health a little bit. I mean, you weren't. Did you see yourself as an athlete, like a real athlete? Like, who just signs up for a triathlon, like out of the blue? Is what I'm wondering.
People who have been through really bad heartbreaks and understand that they need some balance in their partying life. That was really the driving factor of it all. So
Oh, interesting. Okay. I mean, that's kind of cool where you know something about yourself. At least you're somewhat conscious at this point, thinking, I need something different in my life, like something more productive to focus on or whatever, right?
Well, I kept getting those blasts of endorphins, and everybody who works out knows, like you get a blast of you feel good after a workout or partway through a workout.
Yeah.
And I just kept telling myself, like, I don't know what it is, but this has to be it. Like, I have to keep coming back to this because I don't get this from anything else.
I gotcha. Okay. Makes sense.
Especially alcohol, right? So
yeah, I was gonna say maybe it's replacing that, the intensity of partying or something somehow too,
yeah, that's a good point.
Gotcha.
So yeah, so and then it was finding balance, and there was a lot of like people wanted me to go out and drink more, and I was like, no, we probably shouldn't. I need to take some time off, guys, right? So I ended up, I had a personal trainer friend at the time, and I wasn't paying him. Like, he wasn't my personal trainer, but I kind of told everybody, like, oh, I have a meeting with my personal trainer. And they're like, oh yeah, she signed up for this like crazy race. Like, and then they were like, all right, go do you. Like, the peer pressure to stay out longer just wasn't there anymore. And it was wonderful. Like, people left me alone.
Oh, right. Yeah. Yeah. For a little while, they're probably trying to claw at you to come back in, but then they realize, oh, her mind's changed, or she's gone, or then they kind of leave you alone, right?
When things are like out of people's perceptions of what they can comprehend, right? I was like, oh, I'm doing this thing. Like, oh, I'm doing this triathlon. They're like, okay, well, I'm never going to do that. So you go do what you have to do.
Right. Yeah. Oh, it's very interesting. Okay. So you find this triathlon thing that you like start to focus on, and you start training. So how does the first one go, and what prompted you to think like, man, I could be a coach at this. I could really get into this.
Yeah, well, so it took me about 9 months from when I decided to do the first triathlon to when I actually did it. Right. So within that time, I started like learning as much as I could. I had to get a bike. Like, I didn't have a bike yet. I had to go to an open water session. Like, they make you, like, if you're getting in the water for the first time, open water, and that's your race day, that's not good.
Yeah, right.
So
right. Got to have some experience.
Yeah. And people freak out in open water because there's nothing to hold on to. There's no bottom to touch. It's not a pool. And you have currents. You have other people splashing around you.
Right.
The dynamic of the water is completely different. So, I had a lot of a learning curve there. And I made such a big deal out of my first triathlon. Like, God bless everybody who came to my after party and like listened to me talk about this for 9 months. I was so excited.
I'd make a big deal about it too. I mean, that's a big deal to me. I mean, geez,
so cute to look back on now. Yeah.
I guess so. Right.
At this point,
funny. Right.
So I'm a big Gary Vaynerchuk fan.
Okay. Yeah. Sure.
And he had one a vlog in particular that he was like, what do you want the money for? Like, what do you want it for? Like, if you didn't have to work another day in your life, what would you do? Do that. And like, my question came down to like, I'd sign up for more races, and I want to help people.
Oh, right. Yeah.
So,
Thinking about, right. If you had all this money, what would you do? What would the new things do that you would do?
like,
Right.
I'd probably just only do this, right? So,
Right. That was informative.
very tough place to be at like 26, 27 years old, understanding like kind of where I am in my path, and that this photography thing was on the burner for so long.
Yep.
That this was everything I was doing. I ended up putting so much pressure on photography, my photography business, that I didn't go anywhere with it because it was too big of a deal
Oh,
to sit down
interesting.
and really face.
Okay. Yeah.
So it was cool to kind of switch gears, and I had to break down everything and understand that everything I've worked for as far as photography goes, like, I now have to break down and completely transition and start over from zero, basically, to build a now coaching business from triathlon.
Right. And so when you have this sort of epiphany, let's say, or this thought like runs through your head, like Gary kind of smacked you in the face and woke you up a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
What was it? What was the challenge, I guess, for you, like in that next moment, like where you're like, oh, maybe I should do this. Maybe I feel like I really should be doing this. Like, how did you tell other people, your kind of close friends or family, or, because it's sort of like you have to kind of get this new idea out there or let people in on it at some point. What was that feeling like,
Yeah, that was really tough because I had a lot of people very close to me in my life at that point that were very opinionated about what I should.
Right, they know what's best for you. Everyone else does. Yeah.
Everybody else does.
Yeah, of course, yeah.
And it was very tough to have to face not only them, but that part of me that was like, okay, if I'm going to make this huge change, I better do it now. Kind of before I settle down, before I progress, other aspects of my life along. Like, if I'm going to go back to zero, I better do it now. So, yeah, having that pressure was really tough. But the more that I understood and the more that I could internalize that everybody begins somewhere, and that there's this idea that I learned recently that they say that love is patience, right? And I don't think people internalize that a lot or enough. So the more I internalized that, the more I found the patience for me to be where I am in my process, instead of where I need to be, instead of looking at where I need to be and where I'm not.
I see.
So there's this idea that when you are looking at your goals, when you're looking at things that you have planned, your dreams, you actually create resistance to that naturally when you're looking at them, because you're seeing all the things that you don't have. Right. So we need to train our minds to come to this place of, here's what I do have. And I think that's so hard for so many people to do, because, you're looking at what you want, you're looking at the inadequacies. And when we learn something new, we kind of just like glaze it over in our minds. Like, okay, that's the new common sense. So to be able to go back and understand that what's common sense for me may not be common sense for you, we can really start to break apart everything we do know and the value that we can share with other people.
I see. Well, you know what? I just want to dig into this one point real quick here, because I just like the way you think about it in terms of this resistance that kind of comes up in people's minds. And I think, I don't know, someone out there wrote a big book called Resistance. I should know who that is, or that speaks about the resistance in your head, but how it sort of, in terms of just the not the psychology, but the real sort of like mindset of it, in terms of, if there's something that you desire, in terms of seeing yourself and visualizing that you are that thing versus desiring that thing.
Exactly.
Right. I think that's a real important point to make. So maybe you could describe that a little more clearly, I guess, for folks.
Yeah, I feel like everything is visualization. So I got a lot of pressure on who I was supposed to be by other people around me, right? And there was a lot of like, okay, but does she want to do the work? Does she want to put in the effort? Like, this is about hustle. This is about, you got to be ruthless, and you got to, and that really like, so I'd sit down and I'd be like, okay, I'm ready to be ruthless. And then I'd get nowhere.
Right.
It wasn't because I didn't want to do the work. It's because I had no idea what the work looked like.
Right. Interesting.
And I think a lot of people struggle with that. I think especially my generation, who we've been taught we can do anything we want in our lives, but like are really looking for the guidance or the visualization to open up from that. So when you use that word, visualization is a word I use constantly and I love it. Yeah. If you can't visualize where you're going next, then you can't move. Right. So I've actually started, and I do this with like people I'm coaching as well. I started writing down what my end result would look like and who I am as that person having accomplished all those things, but I write it down in like the present tense, right? So I am an Ironman athlete. I got through my day, it was tough, but it was a great experience. So actually writing it down as if it's already happened before it's happened.
I love this. I love this. This is exactly what I was talking. When we were talking to you before, like thinking about is this idea of how to visualize. Like people even hear these words, they don't even know how to do it. Right? Oh, I should visualize that. Okay. Well, what does that even mean? Yeah, you're stating that this is a fact. You're seeing it in your mind. You're writing it down. You're writing down your future as if it's already happened, that this is who you are. It's different from just wishing it or desiring it. You're actually telling your brain that this is your truth. This is your actual story. And it makes a huge difference, right?
Yeah. And the more you can align with that version of yourself, even though it could be a future self, like the more you believe that you're making it manifest in the present. Right. But when we look at, well, I want to do an Ironman or I want to do this, but I'm not there yet. Like you're putting the focus on the negative aspect of it.
Right.
And the more we can sit and align, even if it hasn't happened yet, a lot of people have like this imposter syndrome where they don't believe that they're worthy of what they want, or they don't because they haven't done it yet. But really understanding that the process of going through that and understanding that you're worthy of it, and then feeling the alignment that has to happen in order for you to get there.
Right.
Is just so huge.
Yeah. And I like that word alignment too. So I've been getting myself aligned over the last few years. I think it's actually started, like I quit my job and got into this started opening up my entrepreneurial mindset back in 2006. I was so frustrated with working and whatever, just stuff that was going on back then in the tech world. And I'm like, I'm not taking another job, whatever. And that's what got me into consulting. And then it's been this slower process earlier in those first few years. But now over the last 5 or 6 years, I'm really trying to get my whole life aligned, with the stuff I like to do with playing music and doing technology stuff and traveling and all those things. So it really, like when you start to get this thing aligned, you start to notice like, oh, I'm just happier. I have more energy, right? Like, you instead of going to your job and you work all day and you come home exhausted. Right. Or you thought you were exhausted because you just weren't really doing things you liked all day, There
it is. Exactly. Right? Yeah. This idea that, maybe we're not tired from working for somebody else all day. Maybe we're tired because we haven't done enough of the things that speak to our soul.
Right. You're not lighting yourself up. Yeah. So interesting. Right. Well, look, okay. So if you haven't, figured this out yet, people that are listening out there, Marie has really been able to visualize all this stuff that's been happening for her lately. And so tell me, I want to get to this story of your first Ironman, because this is huge. It's just happened last October for you. And
November,
Yeah. How are you? Oh, was it in November? Yeah, I guess we were down there in October. It was in November.
Right.
So how was it? approaching this race, how did you think about training for it? How did you visualize it? And then you have to tell the story of what happened down there.
Yeah, so it was cool. I was very fortunate to be able to be down in Cozumel, Mexico, training with people who were training for the Ironman, training with the locals. I made friends everywhere. I went in Cozumel and learning the island, learning the course. I got to just train on the course, which was amazing.
Oh, cool, yeah.
Just jumping in the reef right there. And Cozumel's wonderful. The people there are incredible. Everything was super safe. There's actually a bike path that goes around most of the island, and the police are very much on top of, no motorists on the bike path.
Right.
So it was really just ideal. It was really wonderful. So, give me a second here.
Okay. Collect your thoughts.
Yeah. Okay, so there's this guy named David Allen who has this whole process for what our brains do and what our brains should be used for, right? So I learned a lot from him. He wrote a book called Getting Things Done. That's the name of his company. And I've learned so much from him in the last year. So he really talks about the process that our brains are bad offices. Right. So our brains are meant for having ideas, but not for holding them.
Oh, okay.
So
interesting. All right.
We have to, by some extent, trust the process of when we have an idea, we have a process for writing it down. We have a process to go back and look at that. If it can be done in 2 minutes, you do it right away. Otherwise, it's a project, or it can be delegated out, or you scrap it for later. You scrap it or you look at it later, right? So when it came down to the actual Ironman day, and through all of my training and through my coaching certification, I looked at this whole process of, okay, you train, you put the work in for as much as you can visualize it, right? Up into to a training plan. And then the day of the race, you've already done the work, right? So the actual race day, you can't do anything new. They say nothing new on race day. You just have to trust your process at that point. So I woke up that morning and I felt amazing. I was wide awake. I was ready to go. I had my nutrition plan. I had, for the whole day, I knew exactly kind of what to expect on the race. So I lived about a mile from the start, or there's a transition area that we had to go and check in the morning and then take a shuttle to the swim start.
Okay.
So I'm walking along the highway, because that's all there was. Right. From where I lived to the transition area. Now, I was very careful. I was on the opposite side of the cars. I had a headlamp on because it was like 5:30 in the morning.
Okay, yeah, you got to up early. What time does the race start?
Right.
Normally, like 8 or 7?
The races all start, I guess they're like different times. This one started at 7:25.
Gotcha, okay. But you got to get up early to check in and get out, get your gear and all that stuff, right?
Yeah, you got to make sure, there are no, like your bike's not flat, right? Like the tires are good to go. Right. Because you get out of that water, you grab your bike and you go, and that counts on your time, right? So there were bags I had to drop off, like special needs bags they let you put on the course. I put like a sandwich in the bike, special needs, like just extra fuel, anything that you need for the day. So I had to drop that off. I had to find sunscreen. They had sunscreen there in the transition area. There were so many things I had to do. So while I'm crossing the street to get to the transition area, and I'm in like the best headspace possible. I'm ready for this. I'm excited.
This is your first Ironman. You're like, yeah. Right.
I was calm. I was collected. It was a really good headspace to be. And then the next thing I know, I hear a noise behind me and I hit the ground and I spin. The back of my head hits the ground and I'm dragged a couple feet.
Yikes.
and just a motorcycle had hit me outside of the start.
Ridiculous. So you're walking at this point. Did you have your bike with you, or your gear was stashed somewhere else? Okay.
Yeah, it's in the transition area,
Gotcha.
right?
Okay.
So I'm walking at this point, and what had happened was the handlebars from the motorcycle caught the shoulder of my backpack that was on my back. It was hanging off of the one side, and he caught that, and that spun me, and I hit the ground. So I didn't know. I mean, my batteries from my headlamp that I had like a light on me.
Yeah.
My phone, the music I had, like my headphones and my phone, everything was all over the road.
Oh God.
And he like fell off into like the wooded area. So I was completely shaken up after that. I was devastated. I didn't know what had happened. You're in shock in that moment.
And it's still dark out, right?
It's still dark. There were other people that came and ran up and were just like, "Are you okay? What's going on?" And all I kept saying was, "I just want to do my race. I just want to do my race. I just want to do my race." And
so
I said that.
Are you hurt at this point? Or are you still in shock? You're like not sure if you're even hurt. You're just sort of like, what the hell just happened?
Definitely in shock. I knew I hit my head on the ground. I didn't know how bad it was. You don't know in that moment.
Right. Yeah. Nope.
Right. So they kept telling me it was okay and like he's okay. I actually tried to get like information from the guy on the motorcycle, and he took off.
Right.
So
he wasn't
like,
gonna stick around.
I was so upset because of all the training and everything I put into this.
Right.
I was like, can I still do the race? So I was looking for paramedics just to get checked out. I just wanted the okay. And I was told that they were at the swim start. So I still had to go through the transition area. I still had to drop off all my bags. I still had to check on my bike and make sure it was fine. I still had to do all this stuff.
Right.
And I did I just cried like the entire morning. It was a total mess. Right. And I hope I didn't freak anybody else out. Be like going to the start, like just the delirium, like the mess that I was.
Right. Yeah, for sure. Well, it's not just the moment. It's this year, of training and thinking about it, and you're in the moment and you're like, this can't be happening. You're like, oh,
can't be happening. Exactly.
Yeah, right. Oh my goodness. Okay.
So I'm walking through the transition area, and I hear like people start screaming, and outside of the transition area, it wasn't an athlete, but I think it was a spectator, like collapsed. And people were running, call 911, call an ambulance.
Right.
And I just it's so lost in my own head and my own shock. I was like, I'm just going to stay away from that. Like there were plenty of people over there helping that situation. I still had no idea. Like I'm trying to keep track of getting myself together. Right. But I was just like, oh my God, what just happened?
Just adding to the chaos. Yeah.
The total chaos of the morning. And we haven't even started the race yet.
Right.
So we're not even started yet.
The 20-hour day that you're looking forward to, yeah.
Right. So I took a video at that point to send to my friends. And it was at that point I realized I was bleeding. My face, I had a cut on my face. And I stopped and I was talking to other people, and I was like, am I bleeding? Like, what is happening? It was really crazy. And then, so I told myself I was going to take the start extra slowly because I needed to still kind of relax and get into it and like gauge how bad this could be for me. I didn't think I hit my head that hard, but I couldn't find paramedics anywhere. So I get in the water. I'm still a mess. I'm like, just take the swim. Thank God it's the swim because that was my strongest.
Oh, right. Yeah. Okay.
And it's the least impactful of the whole race, having that water. So I get into the swim. I'm taking it very, very, very easy, trying to keep my heart rate low and not, be caught up in the shock of everything still.
Gotcha.
And a girl in the water starts next to me, and I look over and I see a guy completely unconscious and on his back, and
completely unconscious. So is she helping him, or
She's
what?
holding him.
She's holding him. Okay.
Yeah.
Yikes.
holding
Okay.
him in the water. So I help, like, I put my arm up, we wave the kayaks over, I wait till they get there, and we kind of clear out of the stream of like moving people.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, so he ended up passing away.
Passing away.
And
Yeah. Yikes. Okay.
yes. So he had a cardiac arrest at the beginning of the swim.
Wow.
And
When did you find out that he actually passed away?
after the race.
Oh, okay. That's good at least, I guess.
I mean, I knew at that point that it probably wasn't going to be good for him. But yeah, it was confirmed. So what happens is I think a lot of people take the start of the race, they get really amped up. They don't have a proper warm up.
Mm-hmm.
And they try to just go hard from the gate. And if they have underlying issues or underlying health problems or heart issues, you really can't go into the start of something that intense without a proper warm up.
Interesting. You know, since I heard this story, and I think I first read it on your Facebook page, and by the way, thank goodness it's posted on your website, so mariephil.com, which we'll mention at the end again. But I know a couple people that are into triathlons here in Cleveland area, and I started telling them about your story, how amazing it was. I'm like, I can't believe this guy died at the beginning of the race and whatever. And they started sharing with me, which I don't know this scene very well, that this is more common than you would think. Like that this is, like you were describing, like people get hyped up, they don't warm up properly, and this is not that uncommon. Is that true? Like, explain that a little bit for people.
Well, so it's a rare instance. It's not uncommon that if it was going to happen, that it would happen in the swim, right? Instead of later on in the race, where if you're only running a marathon, that if you have that issue or if you have those underlying issues, it's going to happen closer to the end of like a running marathon. But there is that factor of the swim, and people get really, there are many different issues that can happen in the swim, which is why, you know, coaches should be aware of all of the different conditions and how to mitigate them. A lot of them have to do with anxiety. A lot of them have to do with the stress of being in open water, and you have to find a way to calm yourself down within that, right? Now, what we do say is, even though it's common in the swim, the benefits of living the active lifestyle far, far, far outweigh any potential issues like this.
Well, I think if you're drawn to it, I mean, you're drawn to it. I mean, this is part of what you signed up for, really, you know?
Yeah, and his family actually wrote, like, he went out doing what he loved, and you know, there's no regrets. And you know, but all the time and energy put into the training, like, this rare occasion was not the thing to focus on. And so many other heart disease and other health issues can be curbed by actually, you know, training for this. It is a very healthy thing.
Yeah, certainly.
But you need to get checked out, and you need to know what you're in for.
Right. It was just a kind of a real thing to me. That's like, you know, I'm not an athlete like you are. I don't do these professional type races. I just never thought that, like, oh, this is a reality of, this happens. You know, it's not so unlikely. It happens once in a while. You know, that's just a reality of being part of these types of races. I was like, oh, wow. Okay. Yikes. It's another mindset thing to get over, you know, like, to me.
Right. And in that moment, having the motorcycle hit me, the spectator collapse outside of transition.
This is all within like the first hour before the race even basically gets going. And you're like, what is your first full Ironman, that you're looking at this huge long distance things that from the get go, you're like, man, you know, it's kind of like the old Mike Tyson thing, where it's like everybody's got a game plan until they get punched in the face. It's like you get punched in the face 3 times before you even get started. So tell me about how the rest of the race went. So what were you thinking, and what were you telling yourself as you got into the swimming and got past this whole thing?
Yeah, I knew with, you know, everything I had trained with, I knew that these were very individual instances and very rare occasions and very rare instances, right? So I knew I had to just keep going. I was kind of joking, like, well, maybe the rest of the day will be fine since, like, let's get it out of the way now.
Right.
So
ridiculous, really. Oh my gosh.
The good thing about doing the endurance sports and exercising like this is actually, it's a form of meditation. So as long as you bring yourself back to the current moment, and you don't worry about, what's going to happen 20 miles ahead. You don't worry about kind of what you left behind, in a sense. You just focus on where you are now. And having a solid nutrition plan actually really helped me with that, because I had to keep track of, okay, has it been 20 minutes since I had, this many carbohydrates? And, like having that focus the whole time helped to keep me grounded, helped to keep me centered, helped to keep me focused on the moment, instead of the chaos of the day.
Right. You know what, man, this is really, it's kind of giving me chills just listening to you talk here, because I think this is exactly what people need to hear right now, that are going through this whole virus thing like everyone is around the world. This is one of the reasons why, thank you for sharing this. Sorry, I'm getting choked up a little bit, because I really feel it like staying in the moment is how you endure,
Yes.
Not thinking about what your life was previous to this thing, not thinking about what tomorrow might bring, but just staying in the moment. Keep doing the things that you know are the proper things to do. Keep behaving the way you're supposed to behave, like keeping at your nutrition and all that kind of stuff. And that carries you through. It carries you right through, right?
Yeah. And how do my decisions now affect what will happen either tomorrow or an hour from now,
right?
Et cetera. And then a lot of this was along those lines, like thinking about our coping mechanisms, right? If we're stressed, if we have anxiety, especially now that we're staying at home and we don't know what's going to happen next, like what do we do to cope with that? Are we drinking all the time? Are we getting mad? Are we drowning it out with TV and other things? I don't think those are necessarily bad things, but there has to be a balance.
Right. Well, just coming back to that present moment, I think it's really powerful for people to hear is like, yeah, what am I doing? Like not letting your mind race, not thinking about the past or too far in the present. Too far in the future. Just really being in the moment is the key, I think.
Yeah. And that's the biggest thing that exercise and all this training has done for me, is being able to live in that moment and focus on what needs to be done. It's taught me a lot of discipline.
Right. Oh, for certainly. So, all right. So tell me about the rest of the race. So you made it through. Were there any other crazy incidences later on, or?
I made it through. I think that was mostly it. I saw there was a dead turkey vulture that I saw on the bike, and I was just like, oh yeah, the thing that
on the
eats
bike?
Dead things. Well, while I was biking.
Oh really?
On the bike course.
Oh, okay, on the bike course, yeah. Oh, you just kind of hit you like, oh yeah, right. Don't fall over and die because the turkey vulture will get you.
There's so much. No, it was a dead turkey vulture.
Oh, okay,
I was like, oh yeah, the thing that eats dead things was
dead,
dead, had been hit by a car on the bike course, and it was just like, yeah, all right, why not? At that point,
all right. Oh,
it was almost funny at that point. I was like, there's just just keep going, but there's so much good sportsmanship in this community. Everybody was there. Everybody was, we can do this. We're going to get through it. The entire time.
Yeah.
I mean, people I passed on the bike, people who weren't feeling great on the bike, and all the spectators, all the volunteers, everybody's cheering the entire time. These are big events, and a lot of people were there. A lot of people were helping, and the sportsmanship that really helped. I had friends that came down to Cozumel to cheer me on, and I saw them on every loop. It was like a 40-mile loop. So I saw them at every loop, and it was really wonderful to see the sportsmanship throughout the day.
Wow. Yeah, really cool. Well, what an awesome story. And it's awesome that you finished, and this was your very first one. So What are your, obviously you have plans to continue, I guess, to do more once we get through this whole virus thing. Maybe later in the year you'll have more races coming up. Is that on the schedule, or what are you thinking?
Yeah, I'm going to do Cozumel again this year. I'm very much looking forward to that. I enjoy every part of that course. I really love Mexico. I really love the people, that were down there, and the island, like they treat you like a celebrity when you're there, because they are a tourist island.
Oh, right. Sure. Yeah.
So when everybody came in with their bikes, I mean, the whole island was painted, welcome,
nice.
Welcome Ironman Cozumel. Like it was really a wonderful experience. So the first one was really just a place setter. I didn't have the same kind of pressures that I did in previous aspects of other businesses and things that I had going on in my life.
Right.
I really I'm a coach at this, but this was my first one. I had no pressure to be like within a certain time. I just needed we kind of create the space to grow into, right? So when you do something for the first time, you create the space. I don't know how else to say it.
Yeah.
So I was just happy to get through the day. I was happy to finish. That was the only goal of the day. And I'm very happy not putting that kind of pressure or carrying around like shame that this could have been faster. I did it in 15 hours and 39 minutes. And I think it was like 18 seconds.
Yeah.
So I still had another hour to go that I could have taken. And I was very happy just to make it to the finish line. And then, we can work on progress comes in steps, right? So we can work on getting the times down in future endeavors. But if we don't first create that space to grow into, then we can't see what that looks like.
Right, right. Yeah, I like how you put that. Yeah, it's pretty interesting. Yeah, and that's a way to kind of keep your momentum going rather than creating space where the likely outcome is failure in your mind. That's not
you can't
good place to be.
You can't put too much pressure on it for the first time. So, I had to really learn how to not be upset when I was looking like a beginner. When I was a beginner,
exactly. When you're a beginner,
you have to learn. You have to learn, and you have to be open with people about what you need, and to learn to ask for help, which is something that I think this generation really struggles with as well. Otherwise you're never going to become the master of something if you're not brave enough to look like a beginner.
Right. Oh, certainly. Well, I was just going to say, like, when you're pivoting and trying new stuff, I mean, it's really just a requirement. You have to kind of stay in that sort of childlike feeling of, I'm just exploring. I want to have fun. I don't care what I look like, because it's just about having fun and exploring. Like there is no pressure. You're just, I like this, and you just go after it. When you watch kids like run around and try stuff, they're not thinking about if they're good at it or not.
Exactly. And what's the rush?
Why
do you need to be good at this now?
Right.
Why?
Right. Exactly. I love that. Yeah. What's the rush? That's cool. Well, Marie, we got a few minutes before we get out of here on the podcast, but there's always a couple of questions I'd like to ask people that come on, just to kind of, kind of check in with how they're thinking about certain things. And one of them is about technology, and maybe this is a bigger role now since we're all social distancing and having to change up our lives a little bit. But how are you looking at the role of technology and all the things that you have to kind of deal with these days in terms of running a business? And maybe it's becoming an advantage now, in terms of reaching out and being able to coach different people in different areas, or help them with mindset, or some of the branding stuff you said that you're learning. You've taken some time to learn some courses online, technology-wise. Talk about the role of technology and how you think about it today.
Yeah, technology is only going to get more and more advanced. And, when it comes to the complexities of technology, I think people get very frustrated in the learning process, right? There's always a learning curve to new technologies. And I think we really need to have the patience to be able to learn the tools instead of getting frustrated when they don't work the way that we want them to. So I think if we can find that patience to be able to learn the tools, but also figure out what works best for us. There's so many options out there. Then, instead of like just wanting a quick fix, I think there's a lot to be said for the patience that goes into learning things and doing things the right way. Kind of as we were just talking about, being the beginner, whether it's training or it's a new concept or it's a new technology. And they kind of go hand in hand. So I think it's only going to get more and more advanced. I think, especially anytime there's like a market crash or like a bubble burst, I think it really I think it shows a lot of weaknesses.
Right.
I think people are really questioning, especially now that it's this like no contact kind of virus. Right, the social distancing is in play. I mean, the world was already moving more towards remote work.
Right.
And now a lot of people for the first time are having to explore the other technologies involved.
Yeah, I think it's a real opportunity. I mean, of course, I'm biased because I run a podcast called The Reinvention Revolution, but I think it's just paramount for everyone, obviously, to continue reinventing yourself. Or I think people, at least even including myself, always thought like, oh, I need to retrain or I need to stay up on my industry and all these kind of things. But I really feel like this different shift has happened where it's not about retraining kind of similar to kind of just in your industry. It's about reinventing how you look at the world and really embracing the new things that are available to you in this new world. And so you really have to reinvent how you're looking at it as the world's reinventing itself, like right before our eyes. And I think that's, like you said, the market crash helps accelerate some of this stuff for everybody. So whether you thought this was important or not, maybe it's a little more important to you now. Maybe it's a requirement in your life now to kind of figure out like how to order food online, or
exactly,
right, or how to do a podcast, or how to, stay in touch and go to work using Zoom instead of going to the office anymore. So it really is an interesting time. And you know what, this reminded me, by the way, I don't know what was just maybe unconscious though, that one of the things you're doing is which I wanted to ask you about, I totally forgot, but it just reminded me of, is one of the things you're doing your side hustle is Grubhub, right?
Yes.
And I wanted so I wanted to ask you, like, so this is like super important now. And how is that going, and how are you interfacing with people? Because this is like, man, there's so many things. I could talk to you like for another 2 hours because you have so many cool things going on in your life. So you're doing this, coaching stuff. You're super content creator with your photography skills and all these things. But, you're also like, hey, I'm going to do this side hustle. I'm just, you're in this exploratory kind of phase, it seems to me, where you're like trying a lot of different things, which I think is awesome. But how is that working now with this virus and distancing, and how are you dealing with it,
Yeah, and thank you too. So when I moved home, I moved back and really wanted to keep my head down and work this year. I wasn't going to travel as much. I wasn't out searching for answers as much. I just really needed to like sit and build. And part of staying home and actually getting more hands-on with the coaching and what that looked like in person, as well as I've been a photographer for many, many, many years. So I'm still doing that. I've learned to take an easier approach to that. So I signed up for Grubhub probably a couple months ago. And it's just like, I really I had to think about getting a real job, which is really what it came down to.
Right.
Was like, okay, I'm going to have to supplement at some point.
Right.
Especially in the off season, especially through January, February, there aren't as many races going on. I'm going to have to do something while I'm here, and I'm going to have to supplement. So this idea of like having to find a real job to work somebody else's dream, right?
Right.
And not have the flexibility in my own schedule was like one of my worst nightmares.
Gotcha. Yeah.
I feel like I've done that. I feel like I'm done with that.
Mm-hmm.
And I just really wanted to focus on my own stuff at this point. So I had applied for Grubhub and they said they didn't have any openings in the area. But as soon as things changed, or maybe even a few weeks before this coronavirus really hit, I got the notification like, hey, you're ready to go. Send us your information. We're going to send you the bags. And that's it. Go have fun. You work on your own time. You work on your own schedule.
Yeah.
And that was really like, we talked about alignment and searching that kind of freedom to, if I got a last minute photography gig, I didn't have to get a shift covered, or like I didn't have to let anybody else down.
Right.
If I had to change my schedule, if I had a real job, if I had a part-time, or if I had something else going on, other commitments, I didn't want that to interfere with what I was working on. So I was really fortunate to, and I set that up. I put those feelers out there for different things. And then when everything kind of turned, and they needed new drivers, I was probably one of the first on the list.
Right, right. Well, I think it's super interesting. I think it's super cool to explore all these things. Like, I remember, I've been in engineering is in the high tech world, but I had moved to New England. I quit my job, and I had just some more free time on my hands. And so while I did, I took a job at Borders Books and Music, because, yes, I needed some money and cash flow, and I needed to get out of the house, some socialization or whatever, but it allows you to see the world in a different way, right? It allows you to get these different skills. Like, now you're someone that knows how to understand the sharing economy gig structure, right? Which is only going to expand and be more prevalent, right? And so, the next level of that, you're already going to be ready for. You're already going to have this insight into. I mean, it's pretty cool, pretty interesting. I mean, if I only have so much time during the day, but I wouldn't mind trying some of those things every once in a while, or driving for Uber or Lyft, or just seeing how that works, so that it's like, maybe you'll create your own opportunity because of it. Maybe you'll lay that structure onto Tri coaching or something. Like, there's so many cool things that could come out of it. So just interesting thing that you gotten into.
Learning everything that I learned for the triathlon coaching actually really helped me be where I am right now, because we talk about progression happens in steps, right? I've said that before. So when it came to whether it's changing an aspect of your swim stroke, or changing an aspect of your life, the human mind can only really focus on about 2 to 4 new things to change at a time, or 2 to 4 daily habits or routine changes, or whatever it is. We can only focus on about 2 to 4 at a time.
Right.
So I had to really pick where my value was in my life, and that ended up being nature, and like living this minimalism lifestyle or ideal, and not wastefully spending money on things that I really didn't need. And then obviously the health aspects of it all. So when I was looking for a job, I really did not want to go back to bartending. That was my skill set for the last 6 years. And is there good money in it? Sure. But that wasn't the value that I needed. That wasn't what I valued at that time.
Right.
So I was very, and I held out and I held out and I held out for as long as I could to not go back to that. Yeah. So when this came along, it was kind of best of both worlds. It was still industry. It was still, I'm delivering food to people. I'm still very much customer service oriented.
Right.
And, but it didn't have the negative aspects of like late nights, of being around alcohol, of dealing with people who have been drinking alcohol.
Right.
It's an entirely different world. And, now I can't because I'm driving. So
Right. Exactly. Well, I think it's super cool, and it's cool that you decided to put that space in your life for something else to come in. So I think that's a rut people get into where they want to change, but they kind of keep in that same routine, or like, well, I'll go back for now, but someday I'm going to change and all that stuff. But if you just kind of
do it now,
cold turkey it sometimes, sometimes it helps. Well, Marie, I got one more final question before we get out of here. And that is, through all these, recent kind of pivots and reinventions, can you share a reinvention revelation with everyone, like something that you discovered about yourself or about business or about your entrepreneurial spirit that you might not have understood before, or that can help someone else out there?
Oh my gosh, I think that was the whole podcast already.
I mean, I know there's been a ton in there, but what kind of sticks in your mind is like, now that was really, whoa, that kind of blew me away, or whatever,
Yeah, having the patience to understand where I am and to not put too much pressure on where I need to be.
Mm-hmm.
But at the same time, having a structure. So, if we can work every day a little bit, and not look at where we need to be going, but look at kind of what the sum of every day is. I realized that a lot of the pressure that I had and a lot of the shame that I carried around for a long time, being a beginner or not being where I thought I needed to be, really wasn't mine to carry.
Really wasn't yours to carry. That's interesting. Yeah.
Having that visualization, and the other thing is finding accountability, finding a group of people who are that are outside your family, because our family, they kind of see us for, we're kind of frozen in time.
Mm-hmm. Right.
It comes to our family a little bit, but when we start talking about who we are to people that we don't know, they go, okay, like they believe us, right?
Right. Yeah, they don't know any better, right? Or any different.
Right. We're able to grow in that aspect, and we start talking about who we are, even if we don't think we're there yet, which creates that alignment. And the more we can visualize and the more we can find people that are like-minded, and your community is everything. So the more we can find people to help hold us accountable, the better we'll do.
Certainly. Well, Marie, it's been awesome having you on the show. If people are interested in learning more about you or checking out your tri coaching or photography stuff, whatever you got going on, where would you send them? How should they get in touch with you?
Yeah, mariefil.com. That'll have everything. I'm going to give any of your listeners a 45-minute free call with me. So if they have any goals or, physical goals, if they have any races they want to do, if they just want to get the weight off, if they want to, whatever, so this will be a brainstorming session with me to talk about their future goals and kind of the best way to get there. Okay.
Wow. That's really cool. Well, I really appreciate that. And, people listening out there, take advantage of it if you can, because Marie is it. I'm telling you, like I still remember talking to you on the boat, thinking I had no idea like you were this triathlete. I see your physical body, and you're kind of, I'm a bigger guy than you. You're kind of small. I'm just talking to you, thinking like, you're doing what? You do what? You can do what? What? It still blows me away to this day. Then I read your story when I got back. I'm like, oh my God.
Oh, thank you.
This is an incredible person. Anyways, take her up on it. Now's the time. Maybe everybody's got some extra time out there too. So while we're all social distancing. So, all right, Marie, hey, thanks again. I really appreciate it. And until next time, we'll talk to you soon.
All right. Thank you.
Thank you for listening to Jim's Reinvention Revolution podcast. If you want to hear more, join our mailing list at jimjimsreinventionrevolution.com. See you next time. And remember, the revolution has just begun. So dig in, embrace the process of reinvention, and start realizing the success you've always dreamed of. Hey, revolutionaries, if you enjoyed today's episode and today's guest, let them know by commenting on their Facebook page, finding their Twitter handle or Instagram feed, and letting them know you heard them on Jim's Reinvention Revolution podcast, and tell them what you got out of the episode, what you really liked, or how they inspired you. I know they would get a kick out of it, and will help others find the same value that you found.